name is Janice Smith, and we're here today at VMF's Volcan Mountain Nature Center in Julian, California. The Volcan Mountains are where we begin our watershed journey, at the headwaters of the San Diego River. This 15-mile-long mountain range in East County, San Diego, is a vital water resource that feeds 4 important watersheds: San Diego River, San Diego River, San Luis Rey River, and the San Felipe Creek. The native Kumeyaay people named Volcan Mountain Hahachapang, which means where the water comes from, and refers to several natural springs. For thousands of years, human, plant, and animal communities have known that Volcan Mountain is a source of water, life, and energy. A watershed is an area or ridge of land that separates water flowing to different rivers, basins, or oceans. We are looking at a 3D map that represents a section of the Volcan Mountain range. This map is also a watershed model that shows us how Volcan Mountain feeds 4 of the largest watersheds in San Diego County. Mountain ranges and forests are the main source of water in 75% of California's watersheds. Today we're going to focus on the San Diego River watershed that starts at Ironside Spring on Volcan Mountain. The water from this spring becomes the year-round San Isabel Creek, which later becomes the San Diego River. The San Isabel Creek happens to flow right through VMF's Volcan Mountain Nature Center. To show this, let's pour water on our map, recreating a rainstorm to demonstrate how water flows downstream through watersheds, connecting mountains and inland communities as it travels 60 miles to the Pacific Ocean. We've placed buckets on all 4 sides of the table that will collect the water and show us where it travels. Now, let's make it rain! Water from springs, along with runoff from storms, travels downhill through canyons and creeks flowing to different rivers and watersheds. As you can see, the bucket that collected the most water drained into the Pacific Ocean. That bucket received water from 3 different watersheds: the San Diego River, the San Diego River, and the San Luis Rey River watersheds. All 3 rivers travel into the San Diego Basin and drain into the Pacific Ocean. The other bucket that collected water was from San Felipe Creek and the Banner Grade on the east side of Volcan Mountain. This water becomes part of the Anza Borrego Desert watershed. As the water travels downhill through the watersheds, it flows through farms and ranches, roadways, suburban neighborhoods, and cities. All the people, plants, and animals that live along the river live in the same watershed and share the same water source. Water is necessary for the survival and well-being of people, plants, and wildlife, so we share a common interest to keep the water clean. People also rely on clean water for agriculture and commercial businesses. Volcan Mountain is home to large plant communities of oak and pine woodland and a large variety of wildlife. It is also home to the small tourist town of Julian. Almost everything people do affects the environment and the water around them. Let's add some pollutants to our map to see if they affect the quality of the water in the watershed. We will add red dye to simulate chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and motor oil from vehicles. We'll use candy sprinkles for trash left on the ground and droppings from dogs, cows, and domestic animals. Let's make it rain again. We find that the water in the buckets is now pink, showing us that water runoff from polluted areas along the watershed does get into our water. Everyone lives in a watershed, and people who share a watershed all live together in a kind of water hood. Whatever happens upstream in your watershed affects your whole water hood. Okay, now let's go to the San Isabel Creek to test the water quality. From this location, the water travels down through San Isabel Preserve, taking on more water and becoming a river on its way through cities and neighborhoods where it eventually drains into the San Dieguito Lagoon and out into the Pacific Ocean at Del Mar. As we saw in the 3D map demonstration, what happens to the water along the way can affect the health and quality of life in the watershed. Keeping the water clean throughout its journey to the ocean ensures that it can provide clean water to everyone in the watershed. The vast majority of San Diego's water quality problems are caused by pollution that comes from many areas at once, like urban runoff from residential and agricultural areas, as well as industrial and recreational sources. When the physical, chemical, or biological components of water are altered, it affects the health of living things in the watershed. But how do we know if the water in the watershed is clean? Just like scientists, we can measure a number of different characteristics of water that tell us about a watershed's health. Some things we'll measure are the temperature of the water, the pH, and the dissolved oxygen levels. We'll also test for pollutants, including nitrates and phosphates. As you visit the different sites on our Journey with the Watershed Explorers program, you'll observe and record your measurements and determine water quality and overall health of the San Dieguito watershed. You'll compare the results of your tests from the headwaters of Volcan Mountain with the results from your water tests at the San Dieguito Lagoon. By caring for and protecting the headwaters and all points along the watershed, we're helping to care for the ocean as well. We all have a responsibility to protect our freshwater resources. Ironside Spring. We are now just several feet from Ironside Spring. The spring is fed by an underground aquifer that flows year-round. The water is replenished every year with 30+ inches of precipitation in the form of rain, snow, and hail. The first thing you'll notice are the water-loving plants that grow here. Cattails, giant chain ferns, water parsley, mountain mint, tiger lilies, stream orchids, and columbine flowers are all home to this special riparian habitat. Let's stand quietly for a moment and listen to the water. This is a special, magical place. We've arrived at the Sky Island Trailhead, where we'll hike to a view of the San Dieguito River watershed from a mile high. The hike is a 1.5-mile loop trail. Volcan Mountain is a pristine and biologically diverse area. Over 30 different types of plant communities have been identified, which provide habitat and food for a variety of wildlife. The relatively undisturbed nature of the mountain also provides a stronghold for some of San Diego's rare plant and animal species. In this montane habitat, we find big cone Douglas fir, white fir, incense cedar, Coulter and Jeffrey pines, not to mention black oaks and coast live oaks. This is one of several motion-activated wildlife cameras that the Volcan Mountain Foundation uses to monitor the diverse animals who live here. They include mountain lions, bobcats, ringtail, spotted skunks, mule deer. We hike through an area that is still recovering from a wildfire that burned 15 years ago. After all these years, skeleton trees remain standing, creating a snag forest. To help ready the soil for a new forest, Ceanothus covers the landscape, fixing nitrogen, holding the soil in place, and providing shade for new pine, oak, and cedar trees that are taking root. Arriving at our final destination, we are rewarded with a stunning view. From an elevation around 5,200 feet, we can trace the San Dieguito watershed as it winds its way down canyons and out to the Pacific Ocean on the horizon. We can also see some of San Diego's tallest mountaintops through our sky scope that was made by local artist James Hubble. From our mountaintop view, we can also see Cuyamaca Peak, Middle Peak, and North Peak, El Capitan, and Cowles Mountain. It's such a beautiful view. At times, these mountaintops look like sky islands floating above the fog and clouds. Thank you, Watershed Explorers, for joining me today on Volcan Mountain to learn about the headwaters of the San Diego River watershed.